After a decade of talking to women about their weight struggles and their fears and desires, the number one thing that I hear from women as, let's just call it their primary concern, is the fear of not getting results or getting results they can't sustain. And I would say that is, very fair and a very common fear in the weight loss industry at large. And when we hear that 95% of dieters fail, often that is not actually speaking about the inability of 95% of the population to release weight or lose weight, but it's mostly talking about the entire journey, meaning a lot of those dieters end up regaining the weight at some point when, let's just say, they hit their goal and they stop. The maybe more, I'd say, detail and particular dieting strategies that they were doing. And then they regain the weight and sometimes and often more than what they started with. So when I really started to look for how did I want to contribute to the weight loss industry and space, and the release method, which is really weight release, is the methodology that I practice and teach, started to take place in the last decade. The number one thing I wanted to help women solve was this problem. The what happens after you hit your goals. And yes, I will help you get to your goals, but really the longevity, the what happens in the maintenance phase. So you climb this mountain, but climbing down the other side, like if you think of climbing Everest, like climbing back down is also crucial. And a lot of times when people get in trouble, right? So if we put all our effort into getting to the top of the mountain, meaning releasing the weight, but we don't actually know how to maintain it, sustain it, and make it livable so you can have a life and also keep the body you want, that's a lot of times when women get in trouble. And that is a very specific contribution that I want to make to this industry and to all these women that want results that they can permanently keep. So with that said, just to set that context here, I wanted to talk to you about in this episode about how can you then fail proof your weight release journey. So you're putting all this effort and resources and time and money into getting to, let's just say, this metaphorical mountaintop. How can you make sure when you get there, right? So you're no longer afraid of not getting results. And two, how can you actually sustain it and maintain it long term? Meaning, how can you make that climb down part of the experience so that you're really well resourced for the entirety of the journey? And then you can go live your life healthy and happier, knowing when to compromise and what things are really important to you. So, in order to address this, I wanted to break it down into a couple of components here. So, the first component is in order for you to solve any problem, we need to actually identify the right problem. And this may sound obvious, but it is actually harder to do than we may think. So, I'm going to break it down. I also want to share with you my own personal story and some of the hurdles that I went through. And I actually, after 10 years doing this work, a little over now, and talking to women, what I've done is that I kind of gathered the trends and the patterns that I saw repeating again and again. And I kind of put them into three major buckets of what I see as the hurdles that women really, fall into that could derail the progress or prevent you from getting what you want in the first place. I'm going to share what those are. And then, of course, I wanted to know what to do next and how to actually execute on this. So I also will give you a resource at the end of this conversation so that you can actually take the actual next step you need in order to get the results you want. So let's start from the beginning. In order to get results and goals or solve a problem, we need to know what we're actually solving for. Because if you still have this problem, right? If you try many diets before and you tried all the things and you're still struggling with your weight, what this tells you is that you have not solved the actual constraint. You may have solved adjacent constraints or other things, but you have not solved the real root of the problem. Otherwise, you would just have the problem be gone by now, right? And I like to give an example, something that I do a lot in my talks, just like to illustrate what this looks like. If you think of a mother, a young mother with a crying baby, and the baby's crying and crying and crying, and the mom cannot sleep through the night because the baby's just crying. If you were to look, what is the actual constraint here? What is the problem that we need fixing? And you say, okay, maybe that mom needs a more comfortable bed. Maybe she needs like fancier silky sheets or something you think that mom needs. But in reality, what that mom needs is the baby to stop crying, right? So if you address the problem on, say, the mom's side, even though she's the one being impacted, but the root cause is that she can't sleep with the crying baby, without addressing the baby sleeping issues, we're fixing the wrong problem. Therefore, you're not going to give her results, even if the bed is more comfortable, right? This is a bit of a silly example, but it's just to illustrate what I mean. So we need to uncover the right constraint. Now, looking at my own journey, I've been studying health and wellness and nutrition and all sorts of things all the way back. If I look at my, I would say Canadian version, because I did start my career in Brazil in veterinary medicine, but this is like way too long ago. But in Canada in 2004, that is when I started my bachelor's and my master's, and then, my career took over from there. That is about 20 years, okay, of studying the body, health, physiology, biochemistry, you name it. And even with all that knowledge and really using myself as the perfect guinea pig and trying all the things, supplements, protocols, all those things, I still struggled with the three things I'm going to share with you today. Okay. So this is not to say that, it's everybody's experience, but because it is a little bit difficult to uncover the specifics for you, it takes so much trial and error to get the answers that I really made it my mission to find, is there a solution, a test or a protocol, something that we can do early on and get those answers so you don't have to do 20 years like I did trying to find what works for you. And here's what happened. So I have found, and there is a specific test, and I'll tell you more about it. But after I tested myself and optimized, okay, I was eating really healthy, exercising, doing all sorts of emotional wellness and meditations and all the things already. Okay. So I'm coming to you to this conversation, having tried and actually put into practice and sustained a lot of very significant healthy habits. And I was still stuck, especially inflammation was my main concern until I did this test and I understood myself in a much deeper way because I'm talking about here functional DNA testing. So I understood how my body was wired. And finally, when that took place, and I was able to optimize, not drastic changes, but optimize what I was doing to further reduce inflammation and really make sure that my body was being given anywhere from lifestyle to food and habits and all those things, reductions in toxins, which is really important for my specific situation. I was able to, quotations, magically release another 30 pounds. 30 pounds. I didn't even know where it came from, but it did. And I'll tell you more about that story in another episode. But it was just such a remarkable shift. I was actually incredibly surprised, actually, to see the increase in energy levels. For me personally, reduction in chronic pain, just overall feeling better in my own skin, in my body. And those are just some of the benefits that I saw when I was able to really uncover, like I said, how my body was built, right? And then, of course, optimize for it. So the three major buckets that I have realized and grouped into the major concerns that we women, men as well, but my focus is on women's health, struggle with are going to be number one, the wrong fuel. And that one, I would say, is probably the most common one because if you think of a diet or weight loss, the first thing that people think about is let me change or fix my diet, right? So that is true. However, there is not one diet that suits every woman. And I am incredibly insistent on this point and passionate about this point because I believe if all we do is try to fit ourselves into a mold that worked for a celebrity, an influencer, or some diet book, and that is not aligned with how we are genetically designed, anywhere from, heavy plant-based all the way to keto, if it's not the right approach for you, genetically speaking, it's not going to give you the optimal results. And that is just the truth. Okay. So that is one of the major things I was able to shift in my own eating style based on what I uncovered with my own DNA testing. Second of all, so the fuel is the first bucket. And sure, I know that I know you know this is important, but the cool things that this test can help us tell you what specifically you can eat and so on. The second bucket that I thought was like really remarkable, and I see this again and again and again with women, is very much how our environment and lifestyle impacts hormones and inflammation. So I just call that more like your physiology bucket, and hormones and inflammation being the two major areas that I love to focus on because there's so much we can uncover and, in a sense, correct for very much like downstream on the foundation of hormone balance by using the information that we can uncover with this one test, which is fantastic. And the last bucket, so fuel, your physiology, meaning your hormones and inflammation. And the third bucket, and this is probably the one I am personally most passionate about because I know and I've seen it time and time again on my clients, what it can actually do in terms of transforming your life is your emotional bucket. Okay. So when it comes to emotions, I'm not just talking about mindset in the sort of more traditional sense of the word. I'm talking about a much deeper understanding of how we are wired genetically that impacts our personalities and some of our tendencies. And women get really amazed to know that some of those things are genetically driven, but also how can you actually build tools and strategies rooted in your inner value system that is the most, I would say, deep, authentic blueprint of you that governs so much of your decision making and actually tap into that by one, understanding what it is and using tools for self governance of your emotions. So we don't have to rely on treats and alcohol and all the cravings to self regulate. And that is such an important bucket. And I educate women on this constantly. And I share so much of this in my work, in my program, because that is the most overlooked of all the three hurdles, I would say. And if you really want permanent results, unfortunately, all three of these have to play a role. Okay. They do because they are interconnected in a way that's very difficult to separate. And you feel so much better. Or when we feel better, we make better choices, right? So it's beautiful, this beautiful, like sort of, cycle that one thing leads to the other leads to the one. So we've all of this said. So let me just quickly summarize here. So everything we're talking about is basically those are the three buckets. The wrong fuel, your physiologist specifically looking at hormones and inflammation, and your emotional mastery, let's call it that, your third bucket. And in order to fail proof whatever you do, like I said, I believe the most sustainable way is to actually uncover how you are genetically wired. So we unlock the secrets of your own DNA with one saliva test. Okay. And once you have that done and you have the results, what I do is that I interpret that result for women in the context of the symptoms that you're experiencing and struggling with. So I put things in perspective for you in a way that usually blows people's minds. It is one of my favorite things to do. And I often hear for women how life-changing learning this information is. I know for myself personally, it has been beyond life-changing. It truly, truly has. And I really hope to keep sharing this more and more. So if you are ready, if you resonate, that you can also have your mind blown by what your body can tell you and what you can learn about it through this test. So here's the thing. If you are in a place that if you're ready to understand this better and deeper, more like the science side and how those pieces kind of fall into place together, what I would like to offer you is a complimentary resource as the perfect next step. And in this resource, what I did is that I actually went through the entire test and broken down into those three buckets, essentially. And I'm showing to you why the generic weight loss strategy for each bucket doesn't work and why it probably hasn't worked for you just yet. And then I tell you, okay, if we were to do the testing, this is what we can learn and how you can implement it. And I went step by step. And I also do address the topic of weight loss medication. There's so much talk about it. So I'm not swaying you either way. I just wanted to give you some information to consider and things to weigh and do your own risk benefit analysis. So that's also included in this one resource. So I'm going to put the link below in the show notes here so that you can actually click register to get immediate access, but that is the best next step. So we can take what we talked about and now understand how can you actually implement in your own life. So I hope you enjoyed this episode and I will see you again next time.